The technological dawn hovering over the automotive horizon seemed a distant promise, until the Tesla Model 2 emerged like a sharp light tearing through the darkness of the traditional industrial age. In the shadows of the old assembly lines, the tired steel and rusty welds told stories of a time that was about to be buried. The silence of the warehouses was broken only by the metallic echo of the giant gigapresses preparing to shape the future. Every vibration in the ground heralded an inevitable change. The smell of industrial oil gave way to the metallic aroma of pure aluminum being transformed into something almost organic. Technology, once fragmented, now took shape in two parts that resembled the ribs of a titan being born. The revolution ceased to be a concept and became matter. Thus began the story of the car that would rewrite the very idea of movement. The wind that swept through the factory corridors carried a symbolic weight, as if it were carrying with it the definitive end of the era of hundreds of welds that held cars together, more by sheer persistence than efficiency. Watching the monumental mold receive its first injection of liquid aluminum, it was impossible not to feel that something mythical was happening. The front and rear structures of the Model 2 were forming with almost absurd precision, as if an invisible entity guided each flow of metal. Giga Casting 2.0 was not just evolution, it was mechanical transcendence. Engineers watched in silence, not out of obligation, but out of respect for the technological spectacle. The old complexity gave way to a brutal and efficient minimalism. There were no more seams, only continuity. There was something almost biological in the way the newly molded structure cooled, acquiring consistency and strength, as if it were an exoskeleton newly created by a futuristic creature. The lightness was perceived even before any exact measurement. 200 kilograms less compared to conventional cars was just a number, but the real impact was felt like a rebirth. A vehicle that previously had to fight against its own weight now seemed eager to launch itself forward. With less mass, every movement would be more fluid, more instinctive. Energy efficiency seemed to whisper from within the metal alloy. Every reduction in vibration, every noise eliminated by the absence of welds, created not only comfort, but a feeling of mechanical purity. The car would not only be faster, it would be more awake. The impacts of this structural simplification extended beyond metal. Global logistics seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The supply chain, once a labyrinth of dependencies, became a straight line toward the future. Fewer parts meant fewer errors, fewer delays, fewer bottlenecks. The planet seemed to smile at the real possibility of a cleaner, smarter, faster production chain. On the planning boards, costs fell without resistance, as if numbers and graphs intuited what technology already knew. The Model 2 was about to become the ultimate mass-produced car. For the first time, efficiency and affordability were not antagonists, but allies. And then came the energetic heart of this aluminum creature. The aluminum-ion battery, silent in its metallic appearance, pulsed as if it were alive. Its promises echoed like technological legends. 10-minute recharge, 3 times the lifespan, and safety virtually immune to the thermal chaos that haunted lithium ions. It was as if someone had opened a portal to a new energy era and invited the whole world to cross it. The more stable chemistry reduced risks previously considered inevitable. Autonomy stretched its fingers to the horizon. Maintenance seemed like something from another civilization. It wasn't just a new battery. It was the liberation of a paradigm. While scientists tested the energy density, the sense of wonder reached even the most skeptical. The promise of over 1 million kilometers of lifespan was not just a feat. It was an insult to the traditional model of obsolescence. The near-instantaneous recharging seemed like techno-scientific magic, defying centuries of electrical limitations. Drivers could recover hundreds of kilometers in the time it takes to have a coffee. Charging stations, once congested, would now become momentary transit points. It was the end of anxiety, the end of obsessive planning, the end of excuses. Aluminum, abundant and democratically available, severed the geopolitical ties that bound the world to lithium and its volatile supply chains. Global markets reacted like living organisms struck by an electric shock. Countries moved through speeches and decrees, trying to keep up with the abrupt shift in the energy axis. The strategic weight of the battery ceased to be a political burden and returned to the scientific field, where it should always have been. Sustainability ceased to be rhetoric and began to be repeated as a possible, measurable, real phenomenon. The world for the first time looked at an EV and saw a future without hidden compromises. While the Marshall structure and revolutionary battery formed the body and heart of the Model 2, the interior created its soul. Upon entering, it didn't feel like being in a car. It was like boarding a terrestrial spaceship. The 3D HUD projected information onto the windshield with the fluidity of science fiction holograms. Navigation, alerts, routes, virtual objects. Everything merged with the real world in layers of augmented reality that seemed to shape the road itself. It was like driving between dimensions, where data and asphalt conversed in harmony. The expanded field of vision, covering almost 2 meters, made any driver feel like they were inside a futuristic cockpit. Each piece of information appeared with the gentleness of a luminous whisper, never interrupting, always guiding. The road ceased to be just a path and became a narrative. Everything was there, but without really being there. There was no distraction, no excess. There was elegance. There was precision. There was the impressive feeling that technology, for the first time, was in the right place, beside the human, not ahead of them. And then came voice-activated artificial intelligence, an almost conscious entity capable of interpreting 50,000 commands per second. It understood accents, hesitations, pauses, contexts, emotions. It didn't just respond, it conversed. It didn't just execute, it anticipated. The elimination of physical buttons was not an act of minimalism, but a manifestation of technological maturity. The car no longer needed to be touched to be understood. The cabin became a gentle temple, where commands flowed like simple requests to an ever-awake digital ally. When the swivel seats completed their first 180-degree rotation, it was as if the car revealed its hidden second purpose. The Model 2 wasn't just a vehicle, it was a mobile habitat. In autonomous mode, the interior ceased to adhere to the rigid rules of traditional driving. People could work, discuss, socialize, and relax. It was as if the car, previously a static object in its function, gained a social personality. Sensors prevented accidents, ensuring absolute safety with each smooth turn. The space, previously limited, expanded to uses no one had imagined. The modularity of the Model 2's interior made it a mutable organism. It could be an office in the morning, a meeting room in the afternoon, and a relaxation lounge at night. The fast-paced, fragmented urban life found in the car a mobile and intelligent refuge. The idea of getting from one place to another became too small for what Tesla was proposing. Movement ceased to be logistics and became experience. Each journey ceased to be a waste of time and became useful time, living time. It was the end of hours wasted in traffic. It was the beginning of the era of functional mobility. All of this placed the Model 2 in a unique position, as if it were a material synthesis of all past technological revolutions. Its lightweight structure resembled early aircraft. Its advanced battery echoed the space race. Its immersive interior engaged with previously unattainable fictions. The car was simultaneously machine and symbol. It was art and engineering. It was promise and reality. Entire companies began to revise their strategies upon realizing that the competitive landscape had been irreversibly redrawn. Tesla, once again, had pushed the horizon further. Each advancement brought with it profound repercussions on the global economic fabric. The estimated price of the $25,000 seemed an affront to traditional automakers who struggled to maintain margins within antiquated structures. The Model 2 proved that efficiency was no excuse for technological elitism. The democratization of innovation finally took shape, texture, and engine. Access became a central part of the proposition. It was no longer a car for the few. It was a watershed moment for many. Urban planners were beginning to imagine city streets differently. Thousands of light, silent, and highly efficient vehicles could reduce urban noise, emissions, and accidents. Traffic was ceasing to be chaotic and becoming an intelligent flow. Public infrastructure suffered less pressure, as fast and long-lasting charging reduced queues and overloads. Even corporate towers were rethinking their parking lots, imagining more fluid, more connected, more vibrant spaces. Urban mobility wasn't just evolving, it was being redesigned from the ground up. Sustainability ceased to be merely an attribute and became a central structure of the narrative. With abundant and recyclable aluminum, the environmental impact was drastically reduced. Simpler production decreased industrial waste. Battery durability prevented tons of electronic waste. Every detail seemed to have been designed with the future in mind, as if engineers were looking not at the next few decades, but at the next generations. The planet, for the first time in a long time, felt that it was not losing the battle against technology. It was winning alongside it. The comparison chart between models showed, in cold numbers, what the whole world already sensed. A car with only 2 structural parts versus dozens or hundreds. A weight difference that changed everything, from efficiency to wear and tear. It was almost unfair to compare the Model 2 with its predecessors. They were products of a fragmented world. It was a product of a unified world. The metrics didn't capture the magnitude of the change, but they were enough to prove that something extraordinary was happening. Each keyword associated with the Model 2 seemed like a fragment of a technological manifesto. Gigacasting 2.0, aluminum battery, 3D HUD, voice AI, internal modularity, energy efficiency, advanced security. These expressions ceased to be isolated concepts and became chapters of the same industrial epic. The Model 2 was the entire book. It didn't just follow trends, it created them with overwhelming intensity. It was, in essence, the prototype of a future that finally ceased to be a promise. And while the world watched, something greater emerged from this transformation. The Model 2 was not just a product, it was a civilizational milestone. It questioned the foundations of how we produce, consume, move, and coexist. It redefined the car not as a tool, but as an extension of modern life. It was a machine, yes, but it carried within itself the potential to alter social, economic, and cultural rhythms. It was technology shaping behavior and behavior shaping technology. A perfect, subtle, and powerful dance. With each new detail revealed, it became clearer that the Model 2 did not belong to the present. It had been designed for a future that was still being imagined. Its structural choices, its energy approach, its almost sensory interior. Everything seemed to point to decades ahead. It was as if engineers had found a way to bend technological time. The present was still trying to comprehend what the Model 2 already mastered with impressive ease. On the streets, in laboratories, and in global debates, the impact of this machine spread like concentric waves on a deep lake. Analysts tried to predict it, but each projection seemed insufficient. Politicians sought to adapt laws, but the speed of innovation left bureaucracies rigid. Only one thing was certain: the automotive industry would never be the same again. Every automaker, every supplier, every country would have to choose between embracing the new era or being swallowed by it. The Model 2 had become the new ground zero for the sector. Amidst these transformations, the average driver, the citizen, became the protagonist. Access to a futuristic vehicle at an affordable price seemed like an impossible dream until then. But there it was. Real, tangible, about to be mass-produced. Families who never imagined driving a car with a 3D HUD could now live that experience. Workers who depended on fast and cheap transportation finally saw a sustainable alternative. The future ceased to be for the few. It was for everyone. The adaptation journey would be gradual, but inevitable. Traditional auto repair shops would have to learn new concepts, deal with entire cast structures, with perpetual batteries, with autonomous systems. Technical schools would reformulate curricula. Professionals would reinvent themselves. The educational impact would be as great as the industrial one. The Model 2 was triggering a wave of global reskilling that went hand in hand with its technological advancement. It was a chain reaction revolution, unstoppable. In homes, offices, and universities, conversations about the car became as common as discussions about smartphones years before. The Model 2 was no longer just a Tesla product. It was a cultural phenomenon. Memes, theories, in-depth analyses, explanatory videos, political debates. Everyone wanted to understand what this small, lightweight machine represented. Everyone perceived that there was something different about it, something almost spiritual. The collective feeling was of witnessing history unfold. And then, as with every great transition in humanity, philosophical questions arose. What does freedom mean when time lost in traffic can be recovered? What does mobility mean when the car transforms into a living room, office, or rest capsule? What does sustainability mean when clean and abundant energy replaces scarce and toxic materials? The Model 2 didn't answer these questions directly. It simply existed and forced the world to seek answers. In production, specialized robots moved around the giant gigapresses like metallic priests performing an ancient ritual. Molten aluminum flowed like an incandescent river inside the colossal molds, giving rise to their structure in a few seconds. It was a technological spectacle that left any observer in a state of silent admiration. There, amidst vapors and lights, the future took shape, piece by piece, without flaws, without waste, without hesitation. While the public's eyes were focused on the technical advancements, Tesla's eyes were looking even further. The Model 2 wasn't just the brand's next car. It was the beginning of a new way of producing vehicles. Smaller gigafabrics, faster automated processes, zero dependence on critical suppliers. The car symbolized the culmination of decades of research accumulated in secret. Now, that research was materializing in aluminum, graphene, silicon, algorithms, and holographic screens. The interior ergonomics were so refined that they seemed to defy traditional automotive design standards. Everything was intuitive, without excess, without waste, without visual noise. The interior exuded lightness. It invited the human being to enter, relax, and drive, or not drive. The cabin was an extension of the home, the office, life. The boundary between being still and being in motion dissolved. The user experience gained new dimensions, no longer two-dimensional, but sensory, immersive, almost spiritual. Increasingly sophisticated voice AI turned the car into almost a companion. Not a cold assistant, but an attentive presence. It observed patterns, learned routines, adjusted settings, suggested routes, monitored weather, and interpreted needs before they were even verbalized. It was as if the machine had gained empathy, as if it finally understood that driving was not just about movement, but an emotional state. Small daily adjustments transformed simple trips into personalized experiences. From the outside, the aerodynamics looked like the work of a sculptor. Smooth lines, precise curves, absence of excess. The shape, besides its beauty, conveyed intention. The car seemed to be in motion even when stationary. It seemed to want to leap into the future at any moment. The fusion between form and function was absolute. There was no gratuitous design. Every centimeter responded to a real need: energy efficiency, stability, acoustic comfort. It was as if the air had been consulted during its construction. And then, silence. The Model 2, when turned on, didn't roar, didn't vibrate. It simply awakened. Its internal systems activated like the synapses of an electronic organism. The absence of noise wasn't a lack. It was presence. It was the presence of a new era, where strength wasn't measured by noise but by precision. This silence carried more meaning than any engine roar. It was a silence that said, "We have arrived in the future." The light, instantaneous acceleration seemed to defy intuitive laws of physics. The car responded as if anticipating the driver's every desire. There was no hesitation, no effort. The movement was fluid, continuous,